Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. If you're still here after all that, you already know the kind of stories we tell. The kind that crawl under your skin, that echo in the quiet when the episode ends. If you want to carry a piece of that darkness with you, wear what haunts you. Our exclusive line of merch is made for listeners who feel more at home in the uncanny, the unspoken, the things that don't make sense in the daylight. Shirts, hoodies, and other gear, designed with that same atmosphere of dread, mystery, and whispered wrongness. Candles support the channel, feed the stories. You can grab yours at https://theshadowsprintify me, and as always, don't look behind you. The Coyote That Laughed, Chapter 1. The Thing in the Mesquite. The story opens in the wide, lonely sprawl of desert country, far west Texas or eastern New Mexico, a land that seems more shadow than soil after sunset. The narrator, Calder Holt, is a third-generation rancher who's been running cattle and fixing fences on the edge of nowhere for most of his 40 years. The world out here feels older than the map, quiet except for the hum of insects and the rasp of wind through mesquite. Lately, though, something's been off. Coyotes have been acting strange. They've always been around, ghost-grey shapes darting through the brush, laughing in the distance. But lately, Calder's heard something that doesn't sit right. A sound that isn't quite laughter and isn't quite howling either. It happens at night, sometimes near the stock pond, sometimes right outside the line shack. It always sounds close, too close. He tries to write it off as stress. He's been working long hours, sleeping little, ever since his father's stroke forced him to take over everything. But when the new trail camera near the west pasture picks up movement, Calder decides to check the footage before heading in for the night. The camera catches the usual: a raccoon nosing at the feeder, the flash of a rabbit, a moth across the lens. Then, at 2:41 a.m., the frame fills with a shape, low and lean. The coyote pauses mid-stride, turning toward the camera. Its eyes catch the infrared. It looks right into the lens and cackles, not bares its teeth, laughs. Then there's sound. Not from the camera, but from behind Calder's walls. A distorted echo of laughter, his own, looped and offbeat, rolling in through the open window from the dark pastures beyond. And just like that, the desert no longer feels empty. Chapter 2. The laugh on the recording. The next morning broke in a haze of sun and dust, the kind of pale, empty light that made everything look bleached out and brittle. Calder hadn't slept. He sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, the trail camera's SD card sitting in front of him like something poisonous. He told himself he wouldn't play it again, that he'd dreamed half of what he remembered, that maybe it hadn't smiled. Maybe the laughter was just static or a night bird calling in the dark. But memory is a cruel thing. It kept replaying the moment for him anyway, that impossible curl of lips, the reflection of eyes that seemed aware of the lens. So, around 9 that morning, he caved. The ranch house had an old desktop in the back office, one of those bulky towers his dad still used to file cattle logs and taxes. Calder slipped the SD card in and clicked through the folder of clips. Most were short bursts of motion, 10 seconds, 20 at most, until he reached the last one, time-stamped 2:41:08 a.m. He clicked it open. At first, nothing. The mesquite looked like dark coral against the ghost-lit sand. Then motion, something moving at the far edge of frame. Calder leaned forward, heart hitching. The figure came closer. He froze the video right as it turned. It was a coyote. The silhouette matched, but its posture didn't. It stood too tall at the shoulder, neck too stiff, and when it turned its head, too slow, deliberate, it looked directly into the lens. The mouth twitched open, and for one fraction of a second there was something wrong with the teeth. Not sharp, not jagged, flat. Human. Calder shut the video, sat back, rubbed his face hard as if he could wipe the image out of his head. Then he heard it again. A faint sound bleeding through the wall, muffled but distinct, a laugh. His laugh, short, clipped, almost playful. The same cadence as when he'd barked out a laugh last night while feeding the horses. He turned off the monitor. The sound stopped. He sat there for a long while, hand resting on the mouse, listening to the stillness of the old ranch house. The refrigerator ticked as it cooled. Wind moaned faintly through a cracked window frame. And then, faint but unmistakable from somewhere out near the barn, a voice, hoarse and nearly right. Ha ha ha. It wasn't mocking. It was testing. Calder stood slowly, his chair legs scraping against the tile. His first thought wasn't of the gun rack, or calling someone, or even running. It was of his father. Old Ray Holt, lying in that small bed at the care home in town, half awake, asking him on his last visit if the Coyotes were still talking. Back then, Calder had laughed it off. Now he wasn't so sure his father had been confused at all. He walked to the door, every floorboard giving a long, old groan under his boots. Sunlight had gone hard and white outside, washing the desert in glare. He shielded his eyes. The pasture was still. The barn door swung slightly in the wind, but the air, there was something to it now. A weight, as if sound itself had thickened. Then, from behind the windmill, the laugh again. This time it was clearer. Calder's laugh, pitched just slightly off, too slow, too spaced out, like someone trying on a sound they'd heard only once. He went back inside, shut the door and locked it. By noon, the laughter stopped, but the feeling it left behind did not. That night, before he went to bed, Calder deleted the trail camera footage. But the sound, he'd already saved that without realizing it. When he checked his phone before sleeping, the audio had copied itself into his voice memos. Time-stamped 2:41 a.m., and below it, a new file name. Haha 2, WAV, Chapter 3, the Coyotes in the distance. The desert woke up slow that morning, thin light, wind scraping through the brush, everything half-muted under the weight of the previous night. Calder hadn't slept again. He'd tried. God knows he'd tried. But the silence itself felt alive, like the house was listening to him breathe. He'd left the window cracked for air and heard things. Shifting gravel outside, faint footsteps that stopped when he sat up, and once, a sound that could have been laughter, or could have been the coyotes calling in the far pasture. That's what he told himself anyway. Coyotes, nothing more. By the time the sun lifted above the ridgeline, Calder was already out by the fence line, hat pulled low against the glare. His cattle had bunched together in the western corner, huddled in the kind of tight, uneasy formation they used when something big was roaming nearby. He could smell them before he reached them. Sweat, fear, iron tang. Hey, easy now, he muttered, slapping the fence post as he passed. Ain't nothing out here. But when he checked the dirt by the trough, he stopped. Tracks. Coyote, sure, but deeper than normal. The pad prints looked right, but the spacing was wrong. Too long a stride. Like something that knew how to walk upright, but hadn't figured out how to hide it yet. He crouched low, tracing the edge of a print with one finger. The soil was damp from the morning dew, and at the center of the pad was something darker, coal-colored residue that smeared like soot when he touched it. A sound echoed faintly from the ridge, laughter again, or maybe a yip, but it rolled too long, stretching past what an animal's breath could carry. Calder stood, scanning the horizon. There were 4, maybe 5 shapes moving in the distance along the slope. Coyotes, definitely, but they weren't trotting or weaving the way coyotes do. They were pacing. One would move, stop, look back. Another would follow. The others lingered behind, forming a loose line that seemed to parallel him as he walked the fence. The strangest part was the rhythm. Every few seconds, one of them would stop and throw back its head in a kind of call. But instead of the usual high-pitched yip, the sound came low, ragged, almost human, a kind of forced laughter. He went still, hand resting on his belt buckle. The laughter carried again, only now it wasn't one voice. It was many, layered, overlapping, as if the air itself had a memory of the sound. Calder took a step backward, and all 5 shapes froze at once. For a long stretch of time he didn't move. Neither did they. The sun climbed, washing everything in light so bright the desert seemed whitewashed, flattened, unreal. When he finally blinked, the shapes were gone. But the laughter, that stayed. Faint, constant, like the hum of power lines. That evening he stopped by Tom Bennett's ranch, 3 miles south, under the pretense of borrowing feed. Tom was older, slower, the kind of man who didn't spook easy. The two men leaned against the tailgate, drinking warm beers as the sun dropped into blood-orange haze. "Coyote's been acting funny out your way?" Calder asked. Tom gave him a sidelong look. "Funny how?" "Just off, walking wrong. Sounding wrong." Tom took a long pull from his can. "You hear 'em laughing?" Calder froze. "What?" Tom didn't smile. "They do that sometimes, after a storm. Heard it when I was a kid, too. My old man said not to go answering it. Said it wasn't laughing at all. Said it was practicing." Calder's stomach turned cold. "Practicing what?" Tom dropped his eyes to the dirt. "Voices." Neither man spoke again for a while. The wind picked up, pushing a low whistle through the truck bed, and somewhere across the pasture, something cried out. A sound too garbled to place, something between a bark and a word. Tom nodded toward the horizon. "Hear that?" Calder did. The sound had a strange rhythm to it, a familiar hitch at the end. He realized slowly what it was. It was the way he laughed. That night, the coyotes came closer. He didn't see them, but he could hear them moving between the fence posts, soft steps in the dust, the faint jingle of wire brushing. And once, just before dawn, a whisper low and rasped against the open window. "Calder," followed by laughter. His laughter. Chapter 4, The Tape Recorder. The night settled heavy over the ranch, thick and dry as dust. The moon hung above the windmill like a rusted coin, throwing pale light across the broken yard, and the lines of fence stretching away into nothing. Calder sat on the porch with a bottle and an old handheld recorder in his lap, the kind his father used to carry when he needed to make notes about herd counts or repairs. He dug it out from the bottom of a desk drawer that afternoon, telling himself it was for proof, something he could show someone if things got worse. But deep down, he knew it wasn't about proof. It was about trying to control what he didn't understand. The laughter had come again the night before, circling the house just beyond the reach of the porch light. Every time Calder thought it had faded, it returned from a different direction, always faint, always just out of sight. Now he sat and waited, thumb poised above the red record button. The desert was too quiet. Not even the cicadas were singing. Only the soft scrape of wind over sand and the creak of the porch boards under his boots. Midnight passed. 1 o'clock. Then something shifted. A sound in the distance, faint but rising. At first it could have been coyotes. But then the rhythm changed. The yipping broke into a syncopation, a staggered pulse that wasn't animal. It had breath in it, timing, pattern. Calder pressed record. The sound rolled closer. It wasn't exactly laughter now, but something trying to become laughter, sharp intakes of air, a broken chuckle here and there, fragments of rhythm without meaning. He whispered into the mic, his voice trembling. "This is Calder Holt, out by Old Water Creek, about 1 in the morning. There's something out there macking." And then it stopped him. A single clipped ha, then another, and another, each perfectly timed with his own breath. He stood slowly, recorder still running. The beam of his flashlight cut through the mesquite and caught nothing but the shimmer of dust. He listened. The desert seemed to breathe back at him. He took a step off the porch. "If someone's out there, you need to speak now." Nothing. He took another step. The dirt shifted under his boots. He heard it then, behind him near the porch. Footsteps. Calder turned fast, light darting over the posts and the chipped siding, but there was nothing. The footsteps stopped where his chair sat, recorder still on the seat, its tiny red light blinking. Then the sound came again. A laugh, short, familiar. His own voice, coming from the recorder. He snatched it up, heart hammering. "What the hell?" He hit stop, then play. The tape hissed. His own voice filled the air. "This is Calder Holt, out by Old Water Creek, about 1 in the morning. There's something out there macking." Then an answer. "You." The word was faint, low, rasped through grit. Calder froze, rewound, played it again. "There's something out there macking." "You." It wasn't just his voice. It was the cadence of his voice. Every drop, every break, perfect. His stomach turned. He clicked the recorder off and stuffed it in his jacket pocket. Behind him, something rustled through the mesquite. He swung the light again. Nothing. Then, just as he turned toward the door, he heard a soft click near the fence line. He turned to see the trail camera, the one he thought he'd turned off, flashing red again. Recording. He walked toward it slowly, boots crunching over the gravel. The laughter had stopped, but the silence that followed felt wrong, weighted, as though it were holding its breath. When he reached the post, the camera's screen flickered. Calder leaned close, squinting at the reflection in the black lens, and for just a moment he saw it, behind him. His own face, standing in the dark where the porch light couldn't reach. Chapter 5. The thing behind the voice. Morning came flat and hollow, the kind of colorless dawn that made the desert look bleached of all life. Calder hadn't slept again. He sat at the kitchen table, elbows on the wood, eyes fixed on the recorder lying between his hands like a relic. He'd played the tape at least a dozen times since the sun rose, each replay somehow worse than the last. The word never changed, but the voice did. The first time he listened, it had sounded just like him. By the fifth, it was lower, wetter, almost like it had depth, a kind of echo, as though something deeper in the sound was speaking through it. It was wrong in a way that bypassed the ears and went straight to the spine. The clock above the sink ticked like a heartbeat. Calder reached for his phone, thumb hovering over his contacts before landing on a name he hadn't called in months. Lyle. Lyle was a deputy out of Cross Ridge County. Younger, sharp, more level-headed than most folks who worked out here. Calder had known him since he was a kid. If anyone would listen, it'd be him. When Lyle finally answered, his voice came rough with sleep. "Calder, Jesus, you sound like death. What's going on?" "Need you to come out," Calder said. "Something on the property. I just bring your radio." Lyle hesitated. "You all right?" "I don't know," Calder said truthfully. Lyle showed up an hour later in his patrol truck, gravel popping under his tires. He stepped out squinting into the heat, hand resting casually on his belt. "All right, what's the emergency?" Calder didn't bother explaining. He just held out the recorder. "I caught something last night." "On this?" Lyle frowned, took it and pressed play. The tape hissed softly through the little speaker, the sound of night air and Calder's tired voice. "This is Calder Holt, out by Old Water Creek, about 1 in the morning. There's something out there macking." Then came the voice. "You." Lyle's expression didn't change. He rewound it and played it again, then again. Finally, he set the recorder on the truck's hood and leaned back. "What am I supposed to be hearing, exactly?" Calder blinked. "You didn't." The voice. "Right after I talk." Lyle shook his head. "All I heard was wind." Calder snatched the recorder, thumb jamming replay. He held it between them. This time it came through clear as a bell. "You." Calder looked at him, waiting for a reaction, but Lyle's face had gone still, eyes flat and unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded faint. "Yeah," he said. "Guess I hear it now." But Calder knew something was wrong. Lyle wasn't looking at him anymore. He was staring past him toward the barn. "You got someone out here with you?" Lyle asked. Calder turned. The yard was empty except for heat shimmer. "No," he said. Lyle swallowed, eyes darting to the recorder. "Maybe just something with interference. Radio pickup, you know how these old recorders are." But Calder had already noticed his friend's hand was trembling. "Lyle," he said quietly, "what did you really hear?" Lyle didn't answer. He turned the recorder over in his hand, thumb brushing the red light. Then he clicked it off and set it down carefully, as though afraid to touch it too long. "Just get rid of it, Cal," he muttered. "Whatever it is, it's not yours anymore." After Lyle left, Calder went back inside and sat at the table again. The house felt smaller now, airtighter, the shadows thicker. He tried to take Lyle's advice, walk to the trash bin out back and drop the recorder in. But later that night, when he came in from checking the barn, it was back on the kitchen counter. Same spot, same faint red light blinking. There was a new file name on the display. LYLE2 WAV. Calder stared at it, heart pounding. He pressed play. Static, then breathing, then Lyle's voice. "Guess I hear it now." Followed by another laugh, low, animal and wet. Then a word hissed through static. "Closer." Calder slammed the stop button. The sound cut off instantly, but the air in the room still felt charged, heavy with the residue of something that had been listening back. And then, faintly from outside the window, from somewhere near the fence, "Guess I hear it now." Chapter 6. The voice in the static. By the next night, the desert had gone perfectly still. No wind, no insects, no sound but the soft hum of the house settling into itself. Calder sat in the living room, curtains drawn, the world outside a black pane of glass. The recorder still lay on the kitchen counter, silent now, but it felt awake, like a sleeping animal pretending not to breathe. He tried ignoring it all day. Tried chores, fed the cattle, fixed a section of fence that didn't really need fixing. But wherever he went, he swore he could hear faint whispering in the static of his radio, little tremors of laughter, buried beneath country music and weather reports. When night came, the silence almost seemed intentional, like the land was holding its breath to see what he'd do next. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat down by the CB radio on the counter, staring at the mic. It hadn't worked right in months. It picked up ghost frequencies from God knows where, sometimes the sheriff's line, sometimes long-haul chatter out on I-64. But tonight, when Calder turned the knob and the static came alive, the hairs on his arms rose straight up, because beneath the usual fuzz and hiss, he heard himself speaking. "Anyone there?" His own voice looped back, grainy and tired. He froze. Then, a moment later, a different voice, rasping through the static. "You left the door open." Calder's blood turned cold. He turned down the gain, scanned the frequency. Nothing, just crackle. But then the signal sharpened again, and through the blur came laughter. Not human, it started human, but broke midway, fraying at the edges until it sounded like something dragging a laugh through a throat that wasn't built to make one. He stared at the radio, transfixed. "Who is this? I like your voice." The response came instantly. It had that same broken cadence, a mimicry just close enough to sound like him, just far enough to make his skin crawl. "I like your voice." It repeated, softer, slower, until it wasn't speech anymore, just air brushing the mic, as though something on the other side was breathing through it. Calder yanked the cord from the wall. The static cut off like a scream choked mid-breath. But from the living room, another sound took its place, a faint, rhythmic popping noise. He turned toward the dark window. Lightning flashed outside, and for half a second, his reflection appeared in the glass, pale, wide-eyed, disheveled. Except it wasn't facing the same direction. The thing in the reflection was turned toward the kitchen, looking at the counter, at the recorder. When the lightning faded, the reflection remained, even as the room dimmed again. And then the recorder clicked. Calder's voice, faint but clear, came from the counter. "You left the door open." He backed away slowly, pulse hammering. His eyes darted toward the front door and his stomach dropped. It was open. Just a sliver, but enough for the desert air to slip through, cold and sour, carrying with it that faint, almost human laugh. He crossed the floor, hand trembling as he reached for the knob. His own reflection still stared from the window, eyes shimmering faintly gold in the dark. Before he could close the door, the voice from the recorder whispered again, closer this time. "I like your voice." Then, softly from outside, "Can I wear it?" The wind gusted hard enough to slam the door shut. The house went black as every light flickered out at once. And in the silence that followed, Calder realized the static hadn't stopped. It had just moved. It was coming from the walls, from inside the house. Chapter 7. The night everything listened. The silence after the door slammed was so total it became a sound in itself. Thick, electrical, humming like a power line too close to the skull. Calder stood in the dark, breathing hard, the air around him dense with static that seemed to crawl just beneath the skin. He thought at first it was in his ears, a trick of panic or blood pressure, but then it moved. From the wall near the kitchen, a faint whisper trembled through the drywall. Then another. It was the sound of static forming words. He reached for the flashlight he kept on the table and clicked it on. The beam sliced through the dark, illuminating the kitchen window, where his reflection still stood, perfectly still, mouth almost open, like it wanted to speak but hadn't learned how. The beam trembled as he panned across the counter. The recorder sat motionless, its red light still glowing, though he'd unplugged it hours ago. The small speaker hissed faintly. Then came the voice again, not through the recorder, but from inside the wall behind it. "Don't turn around." Calder froze. The sound was wet, like breath pressed through water. He didn't move, didn't breathe. Something shifted in the wall. A scraping noise, nails dragging along the inside of the paneling, tracing the space just behind the plaster. Then 3 slow knocks from within. He backed away, pulse thundering. Every instinct screamed to run, to get outside, to leave everything behind. But the air itself was heavy, humming with that same impossible vibration. The static had spread. It whispered now from the vent near the ceiling, from the radio speaker, from the floorboards themselves. The house had become a living throat, and every surface carried a trace of his own voice, looping, blending, distorting. "I like your voice. Don't turn around. Can I wear it?" He staggered toward the living room, light flickering as he passed the mirror by the hallway. At first, it showed only him, pale, sweating, wild-eyed. Then his reflection blinked out of sync. The reflection grinned, a half-smile that split wider than his mouth could move. And behind it, in the darkness of the mirrored room, something else stood. A shape, hunched and wrong, with shoulders that rose too high, a neck too long, and eyes that glimmered yellow when the light caught them. Calder stumbled backward and hit the wall, the flashlight clattering to the floor. The beams spun, grazing across framed photos of his wife, his daughter, and his late brother, their faces flickering, then warping. The glass shimmered like water, and from every picture frame, a faint breathing began. He heard a dozen versions of his own voice speaking in fragments like broken radio channels. "She's gone. The fence, open. Don't close the door. I like your voice." He covered his ears, shaking, muttering to himself, "This isn't real. This isn't real." But as he backed away, he stepped into the glow of the window. Outside, the desert was black and empty, except for the figures. At first, he thought they were coyotes, but their shapes were wrong, too tall, too still. They stood in the yard like statues, heads tilted toward the house, listening. Lightning flashed in the distance, and for a fraction of a second, their eyes flared yellow. Then, through the glass, his own laugh echoed back at him, deep, hollow, and not human. It came from every direction, from the recorder, the walls, the mirror, even from the dry, cracked speakers of the old TV. The whole house was laughing with his voice. He pressed his palms to his ears and shouted into the static, "What do you want from me?" For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then, from the TV, distorted but unmistakable, came a reply in his exact tone. "I want to see how it feels." The house shuddered. Every light flickered. And Calder knew, deep in his bones, that whatever was outside wasn't asking to come in. It already was. Chapter 8. The Thing in the Glass. The laughter stopped all at once, like a needle yanked off a record. What followed wasn't silence, but pressure. A low, thrumming weight in the air that made Calder's teeth hurt. He stood there in the dark, flashlight beam trembling over the kitchen floor, the shadows trembling with it. The storm outside had died to a distant growl, leaving the world heavy and airless. His own breath sounded foreign in his ears, like it belonged to someone else. Something clicked behind him, a window latch maybe, a whisper of movement through glass. Calder turned, too slowly. The beam swept over the dining room, over the chairs, the photographs, the corner where the reflection had smiled hours ago. And there it was again. The window above the sink had fogged with condensation, though the house was cold. In that thin layer of moisture, faint outlines were pressed into the glass, fingers, or something like them, dragging downward. He stepped closer. The glass shivered softly beneath the pressure, bowing inward. When he raised the flashlight, his reflection flickered, not delayed this time, but split. Two Calders in the glass, one standing where he was, pale and shaking, the other just behind him. The second figure moved differently, jerky, uncertain, like it was learning how to imitate movement in real time. Its mouth opened, but the shape wasn't right. Too wide, too toothy. And its eyes, Jesus, they caught the light like an animal's, yellow and deep, and behind them something shifted, like wet fur under human skin. He stumbled backward, hitting the counter hard enough to rattle a mug off the edge. It shattered, but the sound barely registered. The reflection kept moving, slow and deliberate, its head cocked slightly to the side, studying him. It cackled. Not his smile, not human. The lips peeled too far back, showing gums dark and leathery, teeth tapered like a dog's. And when the thing in the glass laughed, the sound came from inside his own throat. "Why do you look scared?" it asked in his voice. Calder froze. It pressed a hand, no, a paw against the glass. The pads and nails left streaks of moisture that glowed faintly yellow under the flashlight beam. When it leaned closer, the glass fogged over completely, and its voice became a whisper that vibrated through the windowpin itself. "You left the gate open." He didn't even realize he'd dropped the flashlight until the house went black. The only light came from the faint orange glow of the kitchen clock. In that dim reflection, the figure on the other side wasn't alone anymore. Behind it, more faces pressed against the glass, some shaped like his, others half beast, half man, all blurred, all straining forward. Their features shifted, mouths stretching open, eyes sliding out of alignment as if the glass couldn't hold them still. They were all laughing now, not loud, but breathy and wet, like animals trying to remember how to speak. Calder stumbled for the door, fingers fumbling with the lock. The knob was slick, the condensation from the window now leaking down the wall. When he yanked it open, cold night air hit him like a slap. He ran out onto the porch, panting, scanning the desert. The coyotes, the tall, still shapes, were gone. The only thing moving was the wind, and even that felt wrong, like it was breathing with him. Then he heard it again. The laughter. Not from the window now, but from the side of the house, from the metal siding, from the inside of his truck. He turned the flashlight toward it, but the beam flickered and died completely this time. The dark held its breath, and then a handprint appeared on the outside of the truck window. Not a paw, a human hand. It slid slowly downward, leaving behind 4 long scratches in the glass. A low, rasping voice, his voice, came from inside the cab. "Don't leave me out here, Calder." His stomach turned cold. The driver's seat shifted in the dark. A shape sat up, a man's silhouette, but not quite. Shoulders hunched wrong, head too still, limbs too long. Lightning flashed across the horizon, and in that single strobe, Calder saw himself sitting behind the wheel. But where the eyes should have been, the glow of a coyote's gaze burned back at him. Then the darkness swallowed the shape again. For a moment, the night was perfectly still. Then the truck's engine turned over by itself, headlights flaring to life, cutting across the barren desert, illuminating nothing but empty sand and the broken fence line. And when Calder stepped forward, the truck slowly began to roll away. The driver, the thing that wore him, lifted one pale hand and waved. Chapter 9. The engine that wouldn't die. The sound of the truck's engine rose like a pulse in the night, a raw, choking roar that didn't sound mechanical anymore. It was ragged, like lungs dragging air through rust. Calder ran barefoot down the gravel drive, the cold stones cutting into his soles, but the pain barely reached him. The headlights carved 2 violent lines through the dark, weaving down the dirt road that led toward the highway. He shouted hoarse, "Stop! Stop the damn truck!" The desert wind answered with nothing but the hollow rattle of mesquite. He watched his own taillights vanish beyond the fence line, swallowed by the emptiness. And yet, the engine's sound didn't fade. It grew louder. It wasn't coming from the road anymore. It was all around him. Calder turned in place, dizzy, heart-pounding. The sound was everywhere at once, in the wind, the earth, in the hollow of his ribs. His flashlight flickered weakly to life again, trembling in his hand as if it didn't want to show him what was coming. And then the truck's horn blared. It came from behind him. He spun, beam cutting through dust, and there it was. The truck sitting crooked in his driveway again, headlights dead, engine still idling like it had never left. Steam poured from under the hood, thick and white, curling around the cab like breath. The driver's door hung open. Calder didn't move for a long time. His lungs seized, his thoughts running in small, panicked circles. Finally, he stepped forward, one shaking hand reaching for the driver's door. The smell hit first, hot metal, wet fur, something like burned hair. He leaned closer. The seat was soaked through with something dark and tacky. A shape sat in it, hunched low, shoulders shaking as if crying. But the sound that came out wasn't sobbing, it was a low, breathy laugh. The shape lifted its head slowly, too slowly. In the flicker of the flashlight beam, Calder saw his own face, ruined, wrong, the features slightly off, like someone had tried to build him out of memory and clay. "You left me," it said in a voice made of both of them. Calder stumbled back, tripping into the gravel. The door creaked wider as the thing crawled out, dragging itself on hands and feet. The sound of bones clicking into new places filled the air, followed by the slick tier of skin stretching to match. It looked at him with yellow eyes and snarled too wide. He turned and ran. The night seemed endless, the desert shifting underfoot. Every time he looked back, the headlights were there, sometimes far away, sometimes right behind him. The truck wasn't driving anymore, it was chasing. The wheels spun, but the body twisted, buckled, moved like it was breathing. When he reached the edge of the highway, the sound cut out completely. No engine, no wind, just silence so deep it made his ears ring. The road ahead was empty. Calder bent over, hands on his knees, gasping. For a moment he thought he'd escaped. Then the radio in his pocket crackled to life. He hadn't touched it since the night he'd recorded the laughter. It shouldn't even have had batteries left. But now it hissed softly, then tuned itself, flipping between static and fragments of his own voice. "You can't leave me here. You promised. Don't let it in." Then, beneath the distortion, faint, low, but real, came the sound of the truck's engine idling again. He looked down the road. The horizon flickered once with lightning, and in that split-second flash, he saw the truck waiting half a mile away, lights off, driver's door open. The laugh echoed again, not from the radio this time. From behind him. Calder turned slowly, and for the first time he saw what had been following him all along. It wasn't the coyote. It wasn't a man. It was the space between both. A shape standing upright, but built wrong, its shoulders too narrow, its legs bent like a dog's hindquarters, face stretched into something almost human, almost him. Its chest rose and fell as though trying to remember how to breathe human air. It opened its mouth. Drive! Calder's body moved before thought. He ran for the truck, heart a hammer in his chest. The driver's seat waited, the smell of wet fur and blood mixing in the cab. He climbed in, slammed the door, jammed the key in the ignition. The engine turned over immediately, not with the familiar groan of old machinery, but with a voice that laughed quietly to itself. He stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. For a moment, it was just him, terrified, panting, sweating. Then his reflection smiled back, and the engine laughed with it. Chapter 10. The Ones Who Never Stopped Driving. The Road Didn't End. That was the first thing Calder noticed when he came to, hands locked around the wheel, the truck humming softly beneath him like an animal purring in its sleep. The horizon hadn't changed since the night before. Flat black ribbon cutting through pale dirt, no towns, no gas stations, no sign of life. Just mile after mile of silence. He blinked, trying to remember when the sun had risen, or if it even had. The sky was a bruised grey, heavy with motionless clouds that never seemed to shift. The gas gauge ready it had for hours, but the engine still ran. His throat was dry. His legs trembled when he pressed the pedal. Every few minutes he'd whisper to himself, "You're still alive. You're still driving." The words didn't comfort him anymore. They felt like instructions someone had left in his head, a command meant to keep him moving forward. The CB radio crackled. He hadn't turned it on. The cord dangled, the switch still off, but a voice hissed through the static anyway. "Keep your eyes on the road." He froze. The voice wasn't his, but it wasn't unfamiliar either. It was close enough. Calder reached for the dial. It was hot to the touch. He turned it down, but the sound didn't stop. "Don't look in the mirror." That warning settled in his chest like ice water. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror instinctively and immediately wished they hadn't. There was someone sitting in the back seat. Just a shadow at first, unmoving, face half hidden behind the seat's torn headrest. But as he stared, the figure tilted forward, the shape of a smile stretching in the reflection. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure leaned closer until its face was fully visible. His own, smeared with black streaks like oil or blood. Its mouth opened wider than human, and a low, rasping laugh crawled out of the speakers and from behind him at the same time. "Keep driving." Calder slammed on the brakes. The tires screamed. Gravel exploded across the empty road. The truck fishtailed to a stop, the engine coughing, then, unbelievably, kept idling low and steady as if mocking him. He turned, slow, shaking, flashlight in hand. The back seat was empty, but the smell remained. Wet earth, burned hair, and underneath it all something like himself. He flung open the door and stumbled into the still air. There was no wind, not a single sound except for the faint hum of the idling truck. When he looked back at the road, he realized he could see his own tire tracks leading straight ahead until they simply stopped in the dust. No beginning, no end. He walked a few steps. His boots left prints, but when he turned around, they were gone. The engine revved behind him, even though his hands weren't on the wheel. He spun back to see the driver's side door now hanging open, the cab glowing faintly from the dashboard light. The seat was occupied again, but not by him. It was something wearing him. The skin fit wrong, loose in some places, too tight in others. Its head lolled slightly, mouth hanging open as if trying to imitate breathing. When it turned its head toward him, the eyes weren't human anymore. They burned gold like headlights. "Don't stop now," it said softly. "You're almost there." The engine revved again. Louder this time, hungry, Calder stumbled backward. "Who are you?" he shouted, but his own voice came from the cab, overlapping his words perfectly, like an echo played back a second too soon. "I'm the one who kept driving when you stopped." The thing cackled, and the sound of its laughter rolled over the plains, bouncing off nothing and returning from every direction at once. Then the passenger door clicked open. Something climbed out. It looked like a man, maybe, once, but its spine bowed backward, its legs bending the wrong way. As it stood, its face shifted, flickering between features that might have been Calder's, might have been hundreds of others. Every movement of its jaw made a noise like gravel grinding beneath tires. It leaned down, whispering near his ear, even though it hadn't crossed the space between them. "You're not the first, you know. The road doesn't end. You just change seats." He stumbled back into the truck instinctively, slamming the door shut. He threw it into reverse, tires shrieking, engine roaring. The headlights flashed over the figure, and for just a heartbeat, there were dozens of them. Shapes standing along the roadside, half human, half canine, everyone with golden eyes reflecting his beams, and every single one of them wore his face. Calder screamed and floored it. The truck surged forward, engine howling with him, both of them laughing through the dark. The speedometer needle climbed, 80, 90, 100, but the horizon never got closer. The world stretched, the road looped, and no matter how long he drove, the gas gauge stayed empty and the engine never died. At some point, he stopped fighting. He realized the laughter wasn't outside anymore. It was coming from his own throat, layered, doubled, a chorus of himself echoing from the cab. His reflection in the windshield grinned wider, eyes yellow, mouth too long. He tried to close his eyes, but the thing behind the wheel didn't let him. The road ahead shimmered, folding in on itself, and Calder finally understood the old trucker stories, the voices on the CB, the headlights that never stopped moving. Somewhere far behind him, the desert swallowed another scream that sounded almost like his. And somewhere ahead, in the dark curve of the world, the road waited, endless, alive, whispering softly, "Keep driving." Chapter 11. The rest stop that wasn't there. The truck was still running when they found it. A rust-colored pickup, half swallowed by dust, idling quietly at the edge of a cracked asphalt lot that didn't appear on any map. The kind of place that shouldn't have existed. No signage, no lights, no fuel pumps. Just a single row of skeletal awnings, a flickering vending machine slumped against the wall, and a weather-beaten restroom door that swung open and closed in the still air. The badge on the responding deputy's chest read H. Moraine. She'd driven 50 miles off her usual patrol route, chasing a phantom call that came through dispatch, an automated ping from a vehicle reported missing 3 days prior. The coordinates led her here, and nowhere between towns. She cut the engine, stepped out and listened. Wind. Static, the dry rattle of metal on metal, and beneath it, a low hum, steady and rhythmic, pulsing from the truck like a heartbeat. She called out once. "Hello, anyone here?" No answer. When she approached, her boots sank slightly into the dust, the ground soft as ash. The closer she got, the stranger it felt, like the air had weight, pressing against her ears. She opened the driver's door and immediately froze. The cab was clean, too clean, the floor mats spotless, the seat cushions untouched. The key turned halfway in the ignition, the radio dialed to a frequency that didn't exist. Through the static, a faint whisper bled out, a voice that almost sounded human. "Don't stop, Don't stop, don't stop. Moraine swallowed hard, turned the knob, and the voice cut out mid-breath. She looked around the cab again. There was something on the dash, a tape recorder, old and scuffed, the kind with side buttons that clicked like a typewriter. A strip of duct tape across the top read, CALDER 1019, she hesitated, then pressed play. At first, nothing, just the low groan of the truck's engine, distant and looping. Then a man's voice came through, rough, shaking, whispering like he was trying not to be overheard. If anyone finds this, don't follow the road past mile marker 93. It loops. You think you're getting closer to town, but you're not. You're being listened to. A pause, the sound of breathing too close to the mic. Something got in the cab. Looks like me, talks like me. The longer you drive, the more it remembers. I don't think it ever runs out of gas because it isn't the truck running. It's us. It's... A burst of static swallowed the words. When the recording resumed, the tone had changed. The voice was deeper, smoother. Keep driving, Calder. Almost there. The tape clicked off by itself. Deputy Moraine stepped back, heart pounding. She looked toward the horizon. There were no towns, no buildings, nothing but the sun hanging too low in the sky. She tried her radio. Nothing but white noise. She turned back to the truck and saw something impossible. There were tire tracks leading away from the lot, fresh ones. 2 sets, one going out, one coming in, but they overlapped perfectly, like a snake biting its own tail. When she followed them a few steps, they simply disappeared. That was when she noticed the sign. It hadn't been there when she arrived. She would have sworn on her badge. A single green highway marker leaning at an angle beside the vending machine. The paint flaked, but legible enough to read. Rest stop 93, she drew her gun and backed toward her cruiser. Her boots crunched over the dust, each step louder than the last. She was 10 feet from the driver's door when her radio flared to life again, the same static frequency as the truck. Then a voice, her own voice. Don't stop now, Deputy, you're almost there. The cruiser's engine roared to life on its own. Headlights blazed, pointing straight toward her. In their glare, she saw figures, silhouettes moving just beyond the beam, dozens of them, walking in slow, synchronized steps. Their eyes reflected gold. Their mouths all moved the same way, murmuring the same phrase over and over, like a prayer with no end. Keep driving, keep driving, keep driving. The truck engine joined in, rumbling louder. The vending machine buzzed, shaking until the glass cracked. Every sound fused into one deafening chorus, road noise, breathing, voices, and Moraine stumbled back, gun shaking in her hands. The lights went out. Everything, the truck, the cruiser, the voices, vanished into silence. When she opened her eyes, the rest stop was gone. No awnings, no building, just her standing in an empty field beneath a sky that hadn't changed color in hours. Her cruiser was gone too, but the truck was still there, headlights now dark, engine dead at last. She approached again, slowly, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. A pull, a whisper threaded through her thoughts like a song she almost remembered. When she leaned into the cab this time, the tape recorder was gone. In its place sat a fresh roll of duct tape and a marker. A new strip of tape already waited across the dash. It read, Moraine 1022 then, somewhere in the distance, faint, mechanical, steady, came the sound of an engine turning over. And from the truck's speakers, as if carried on a dying frequency, the last human word left on that stretch of road. Next stop. Chapter 12. The voice that reversed. They found the tape in the dust. Not on the dash, not inside the truck, underneath it. Wedged tight against the undercarriage, still warm from the engine that shouldn't have been running. The lettering was smeared, but still legible through the grime. Moraine 1022, by the time the recovery team arrived, there wasn't much to recover. The vehicle had drained itself of fuel, though the mileage counter showed it had traveled an impossible 200 miles since its last known coordinates. No one could explain how a truck could move that far without refueling, or how every nearby gas station had reported no vehicles passing through. When they rewound the tape, the audio began backward. At first, just distortion, wind pulled through a tunnel, voices that melted into each other, like language chewed into static. Then a sound that wasn't quite speech, but wasn't mechanical either. A man's voice laughing in reverse, low and ragged, the syllables twisting back into air. But then, slowly, it corrected itself. A woman's breathing, panicked, labored, the microphone clicking against something, probably the steering wheel. And then Moraine's voice, clear for a moment before the interference began again. "This isn't the road anymore. It's remembering us." A pause. Then the sound of gravel under tires, though the tone of it was wrong. The tires weren't crunching forward, they were reversing, backing over stone. "I can't turn around," Moraine whispered. "I am turned around." The wind picked up, drowning her voice in bursts. But another voice leaked through, softer, calm, as if seated in the passenger seat beside her. "You don't have to drive, Helen. You already did." Then silence. For a long while, just silence and tape hiss. Then, faintly, the sound of a radio coming on, a broadcast no one recognized. "And to all our drivers out there, we see you. Keep those lights on, keep those wheels turning. Remember, it's not the road that ends. It's you." The tape sped up on its own, the hiss warping into a rising pitch. Then, bang, the sound of metal crunching, followed by a single word muttered like an afterthought, almost mournful. "Reverse." The playback ended abruptly there, but that wasn't the most disturbing part. Because when they checked the timestamp on the recording, when it was supposedly created, it read 10:22, 11:58 p.m. The same time Moraine's cruiser GPS pinged its last location. The coordinates, mile marker 93. The investigation that followed never made it to the public record. A handful of officers in the county reported hearing their own voices coming through their patrol radios late at night. Not the recordings, but responses to things they hadn't said yet. One deputy claimed his dashcam caught a reflection in the windshield. Not his, not Moraine's, but a third figure in the back seat with yellow glinting eyes, staring straight into the lens. After that, the rest stop was quietly removed from the state map. The Department of Transportation filled the old asphalt lot with gravel, erected a fence around the perimeter, and labeled it as an abandoned quarry site. But every few months, someone driving through the back highways swears they see it. The vending machine light flickering on the horizon, the outline of a truck idling at the edge of nowhere, its reverse lights glowing white against the dark. If they slow down, they hear it too. A voice through the static, clear and calm, as if through the CB radio. "Keep driving, or don't. The road remembers both." And if they look in their rearview mirror, sometimes, just for a second, they see a second vehicle following close behind. Its headlights never move. They only get closer. You made it back for now. But the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch, they wait, and perhaps they remember you now too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video. Subscribe, but know this, some doors once opened do not close so easily.